Hello, I'm Dawson Iasillo, and this is Punctual Politics. Big international and domestic news today. Partial agreement between Hamas and a ceasefire plan pushed by President Donald Trump. The U.S. government shutdown stretching into a 6th day today. The Supreme Court turning away an appeal by Ghislaine Maxwell. A flurry of legal fights over the federal deployment of National Guard troops to states and cities. A political earthquake in France. Federal workers suing the Education Department over partisan shutdown emails, and a major media shakeup as Paramount and Skydance acquires Barry Weiss's The Free Press and names her editor-in-chief of CBS News. We'll take each of those in turn, context with what happened and why it matters. Let's begin in the Middle East. In early October, President Donald Trump unveiled a multi-point ceasefire plan aimed at pausing the fighting between Israel and Hamas. Multiple outlets report that Hamas has agreed to parts of the plan, though not to every element, and that Israel has signaled willingness to implement at least some initial steps as the party continues talks. The accepted pieces reportedly included steps meant to allow humanitarian aid and limited pauses in intense bombing near population centers while negotiations continue. So why is this notable? Trump's plan has been treated as an influential diplomatic intervention because of his continued high profile and connections in the region. The partial acceptance by Hamas is meaningful because it creates a narrow opening for hostage releases, targeted humanitarian relief, and temporary de-escalation. But partial acceptance is not the same as a durable ceasefire. Observers warn that gaps in agreement, lack of clear verification mechanisms, and competing incentives on the ground mean any pause could be fragile. So what to watch for next? Whether Israel and Hamas convert over partial agreement into concrete, verifiable steps. For instance, the release of hostages or the sustained flow of aid, and whether established diplomatic channels, regional governments, the UN, or the sitting U.S. administration coordinate or clash with private mediators pushing plans. Back in Washington, the federal government remained closed for a 6th consecutive day as of today. Lawmakers remain far apart on competing spending bills and key policy riders. And the impasse has left hundreds of thousands of federal employees either furloughed or working without pay. Congress and the White House have traded blame as services slow and contractors feel the strain. Practical effects are widespread: delayed processing in some federal agencies, closure or limited staffing at national parks, and stress for families who live paycheck to paycheck. Leadership in the House and Senate has been under intense pressure to produce stopgap measures. At the same time, negotiations have been complicated by policy demands, notably over healthcare subsidies and other high-profile priorities. On top of that, a new legal fight has broken out inside the federal government. Union officials and workers say the Department of Education sent or allowed to be sent automated out-of-office emails or messages that blamed one political party for the shutdown. Federal employee unions have filed suit alleging those messages violated workplace neutrality, rules, and employees' rights. That lawsuit adds a legal, ethical, and public relations wrinkle to the shutdown story. The U.S. Supreme Court opened its new term today, and on the docket is a spate of high-profile cases that observers say will test presidential power, civil rights laws, and other major issues this year. The court's new 9-month term kicks off with a lineup that legal analysts expect will shape policy going into next year. On the same day the court began its term, it also declined to take up an appeal from Ghislaine Maxwell, who had been convicted in the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking case and sentenced to 20 years. With the Supreme Court refusing to hear her challenge, her conviction and sentence stand. And her legal routes to overturning those convictions have narrowed considerably. Her lawyers had argued that a prior non-prosecution agreement involving Epstein should have blocked the Manhattan prosecution. The courts have not accepted that claim, and there has been public discussion about clemency as a remaining option. But that, too, faces political complications. The Maxwell decision brings an important closure point to a long and painful saga for survivors. It also underlines the court's gatekeeping role on cases with enormous public interest. Separately, the cases scheduled this term could very directly test executive authority and other questions tied to the current political moment. There's a spate of litigation over the federal government's recent moves to send National Guard forces to cities and states, and those fights are heating up quickly. Illinois and the city of Chicago filed suit against the federal government, arguing that the deployment plans exceed executive authority and raise constitutional and federalism concerns. City and state officials say that deployments were ordered without adequate consultation and could undermine local public safety strategies. Relatedly, a federal judge in Oregon issued a temporary restraining order blocking the administration from sending National Guard units to that state. District Judge Karen Immergut, a Trump appointee, questioned the administration's justification and the legal basis for federalizing state Guard units in the circumstances presented, and she issued an order that halts further Guard deployments to Oregon while the case proceeds. That single judge's order could be appealed and may end up before higher courts, but for the moment, it restrains the administration's immediate plans. These cases probe the boundary between state control of the Guard and federal authority, a complex area of law that combines questions of the Insurrection Act, the federalization of Guard troops, and the constitutional allocation of powers. The legal outcomes could set precedents about when and how the federal government can move state forces into other states for domestic operations. Across the Atlantic, France was shaken by a dramatic political development. Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu resigned just hours after unveiling his new cabinet, plunging President Emmanuel Macron's government into fresh crisis. The resignation came amid a fierce opposition to Macron's policies and internal party tensions. Analysts say it raises the prospect of either a rearranged coalition, a new prime minister, or even snap elections if a political compromise can't be found quickly. Political instability in France has immediate domestic consequences: protests, market jitters, and collateral effects on European policy making at a delicate moment for EU economic and security discussions. To return briefly to the shutdown and its internal battles, unions representing furloughed education department employees have sued, saying automated out-of-office and other messages were altered or sent to blame Democrats for the shutdown in violation of civil service and ethics rules. The case raises questions about agency communications sent from employees' accounts without consent. The application of the Hatch Act and First Amendment issues a politically charged environment. Expect the litigation to move quickly because the effects are timely and reputational. Finally, a major move in the media. Paramount Skydance has acquired Barry Weiss's outlet, The Free Press, in a deal widely reported at roughly $150 million, and the company has installed Weiss as editor-in-chief of CBS News. The acquisition and hire, confirmed by multiple outlets, put a high-profile, often controversial commentator and founder of a fast-growing independent outlet into a key leadership role at a legacy broadcast news organization. CBS News is a storied brand, naming an outsider with a strong ideological profile to a top editorial spot is likely to shift newsroom debates about tone, priorities, and audience. Staff reaction has ranged from cautious to openly skeptical at outlets that have reported the move, and media analysts are already discussing how this might reshape coverage priorities, particularly on polarizing issues like culture war topics and foreign policy coverage. The deal also signals how legacy media owners are buying digital native audiences to refresh distribution and advertising models. So that was a lot. Let's recap. There was partial movement toward a ceasefire plan in Gaza, a grinding U.S. shutdown that's now in its sixth day today, with legal and staffing fallout. The Supreme Court denying Maxwell's appeal as a new term opens. State and city lawsuits pushing back on National Guard deployments, with a judge in Oregon temporarily blocking troop movement. A sudden resignation in France that deepens political instability there. Federal employees suing over partisan shutdown emails, and a major media acquisition that puts Barry Weiss in charge at CBS News. If you like this episode, subscribe to the Daily Nebraskan YouTube. We'll be watching these stories and bringing you updates as they develop. Next week, we'll be having a discussion-based episode to talk about some of the biggest headlines. Daily Nebraskan's video editor, Jackson Ingvoldstad, will be joining us then. Until then, stay informed, and I will see you here next week.